Hey, friend, welcome to Red Hot Mindset. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend here with me. At some point in everybody's life, and this really can come at any age, young or old, but at some point we will ask ourselves, what am I doing? This came into my life after breaking my ankle 2.5 years ago. And I was stuck in a transition where I was just forced to slow down and actually take a look at what I was doing. And I had to decide if it was the direction that I wanted to be going. Breaking my ankle caused many emotions and difficulties to arise, but it also became a blessing in my life because it was through that painful experience that God helped me to simplify and redefine my life. I learned what was truly important and what I could really just let go of. Author Lynn Brown has experienced a plethora of these transitions, and today she's joining me to share what her transition from a successful career woman to a stay at home mom was like for her and how she was able to redefine her own life through that major life change. Lynn Brown lives in Kirkland, Washington with her husband, Greg. After two wonderful careers in retail buying and sales, she decided to retire and enjoy every moment of her young family's life. Once their children left the nest, Lynn continued with her love of gardening and the joy of being the caretaker of their cottage. Lynn also pursued her dream of writing and penned her first novel called Three. She was a contributing author in The Lemonade Stand from Sour to Sweet with her short story, A Mom's Christmas. Lynn is currently finishing her second book and looking forward to fun projects ahead. Are you ready to step into the fire with me? Let's get to it. Hey, Lynn, thanks so much for joining me on Red Hot Mindset today. I'm excited to dive into your story.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here, and I think that the topics we're going to talk about are very important. So I'm excited to be part of that.
Yes, I do too. And I think many of my listeners are going to relate to all of the topics we're talking about, probably all of them. And so before we dive in, though, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about you so we can get to know you better before we dive in.
Okay. Um, I live in Kirkland, Washington. I love living in the Pacific Northwest. It's one of my favorite places. I love walking every day. Have a husband that we've been married. Let's see. I have to think about this, Gabe. It's 36 years
Wow, awesome.
this June, and two kids, 29 and 31, and one in Seattle, one living in California. And love animals, love dogs. Don't have one right now. We lost our puppy about a year ago. So that's always hard. But Greg and I are traveling. So, that's kind of a game changer with having a pet at home. So those
Yes.
are probably the stories that I've written, the book that I wrote, and then the stories involved in, with the Lemonade Stand. They're all faith-based. I am a Christian. I fiercely believe in God. I believe in prayer. I believe in having God in your life, and even when it's pretty, and even when it's ugly,
Yeah.
So
Me too. Amen.
yeah.
When it's pretty, we need them. And when it's ugly, we need them even more.
Yeah.
Um, so wonderful. I love it. Now, before we start, did you always see yourself as an author, or what brought on the inspiration to write a book?
Um, Probably, I mentioned I think it was an example in the Lemonade Stand that I had been in a sales meeting, and they had gone around the table and asked everybody, what do you see yourself doing? If you could pick something right now, what would you be doing? And I had written down, I'd write a children's book, and I kind of surprised myself with that and thought, wow, really? Because would I really be doing that? And it planted a seed. And then when the kids were born, I communicated with Max for the first 6 months. I probably sang to him, Gabe, more than I even
Mm.
spoke to him. And then then Anna was born a couple years later, and I started writing poems for them, and I started communicating with them as they grew older through well, especially when they were teenagers, through poems, that I would leave, on the mirror because it's just easier to communicate with them sometimes in a different when you're not standing in the room. Um, and just sort of started writing stories, talking to them about stories, not just reading to them, but making up stories. And so it just was a really interesting process. And then when in 2007, the kids got in a car accident, and um, it was that's what my book three from beginning to end is about. And I felt really driven, and I felt, when I say driven, I felt pushed by God to write a story about what had happened. And so I sat down and started actually physically writing a novel. And I just loved that whole process. And I found a whole new chapter in my life that I'd sort of been leading up to. We do lead up to these things. They don't just come. We may not recognize the signs,
Mhm.
but we do lead up to the things that we love to do.
That's so cool. It's neat how your gifting was kind of drawn out throughout the years, and it wasn't just
Yes.
immediate right away. You knew exactly what it was going to be. It was kind of that prodding and figuring it out as you went,
Yes.
and that's really cool. I love it. And we're going to be talking a little bit about your career life and the transitions you've made. But you immediately, when you started into your career, you immediately shifted and went a different direction than you had initially planned. What was that like for you coming out of college?
Oh, coming out of college. So I had planned on being a social worker, but yet, all the jobs that I'd had in high school and the things that I had done and what I'd really enjoyed was in retail and in clothing and that kind of thing. And so when I got out of college and did not get the job that I thought I was going to get, I had to make a decision about what I was going to do. So I went to an executive training program at a department store and started as what did I start as a department manager, and then you go into an assistant buyer and then into a buyer. And I did get offered that job that I wanted, and I think I mentioned that in Lemonade Stand. I got offered the job that I wanted with the boys home. It was a boys home in Corvallis, Oregon, and I turned it down. And that was a big why in the road. Had I chosen to go back and do that, I would have had a different career path. So I think sometimes decisions, whether you realize they're conscious or not, there are whys in the road that take you to other paths.
hmm Yeah, it's so true. And you came to love your career. You were very
Loved it.
successful at it. So
Loved it.
much promotion and so many possibilities just throughout that career. But I know that there was a transition for you as the years went on, and as you had Max and Anna. What
Mhm.
made you and your husband start talking about the possibility of you stepping away from your successful career and moving home?
Well, both of us were traveling and working long hours. At that point in time, I was a sales rep, so I left the buying and I was a sales rep, and I still had to travel, even though it was a much better lifestyle for me as a parent to be in sales because I worked from home the last few years of that. Um, it was one of those things where I felt like we loved our nanny, we loved our whole situation, but I felt like I wanted to contribute more to their daily. I wanted to be with them every day. And Anna, um, her color wasn't off. And as a mom, you can feel things. And I do believe it's truly throughout your heart down to the cellular level. You can feel when things are not right. And her color was off. And this went on for a long time. And I kept taking her back to the doctor and having her blood drawn to see if she was anemic, to see if something was wrong. Her color didn't look right. And uh, nothing was ever wrong. But I knew something wasn't right. And I will say that when I finally made the decision, and I say we because Greg and I had talked about it for probably a year plus, and then made the decision to stay home. um, Anna's health changed pretty quickly. Yeah. Yeah. She was born a little bit early. Not well, they said she was fully cooked, but my mom was dying from cancer.
Mm.
And we were trying to, it was all happening at the same time. And we were trying to have her born. So we induced her. And quite frankly, Gabe, I would have to say that I think her immune system was not fully developed. So after I stayed home, I worked on that a lot with her and in very natural ways to try and get her immune system boosted. So
Mm. What a blessing that is then that
it
you
was
got to take
wonderful.
that time to do
It
that,
was
and
wonderful.
she has no health issues, right?
No health issues. She
So
was fully great. As a matter of fact, the very first day that I stayed home and picked her up from preschool and dropped her off, and then she knew I was coming back to pick her up. She was in the fours class. She was in her second year of preschool. Later on, her teacher told me that Anna walked in that morning and said, "My mom's going to stay home with me." And Anna would the teacher explained to me that Anna would play with herself over in the corner or whatever and wasn't fully engaged with a lot of the other kids. And she said, boy, when Anna came in and made that announcement, her whole world opened up. And that's not to say that I think working mom, being a stay at home mom, you have to do the best that you can do under all of your circumstances. So you can be involved and be a working mom. You can be involved. You can be not in, be a stay at home mom and not be involved, you know? So there are many different avenues that moms can take. Now I was 42 when
mm,
I decided to do this, when Greg and I had this conversation. And so I had had two fabulous careers already. And I knew who I was.
mm.
And I think that I was talking to my sister last night, and she said, you make sure that when you talk about being a stay at home mom, that you're really clear that you had, you know, two careers. And it wasn't like you were 19 years old and didn't know who you were. And I think that there is a lot to be said about that. But I also think, depending on your circumstances and depending on when you get married, I didn't get married till I was 30, depending on when you get married and who you marry and the choices that you make together as a couple and that you make as a mom have a lot to do with you need to make sure that you're okay with yourself one way or another and
Yeah.
continue to grow. We can all have many chapters in our lives. That's the great part.
That is, and it's really neat because it's true. Our lives are really like a book. They really are
Yes.
chapters, and we close the page on a chapter and we open a new
Yes.
one, and it can happen at any
Yes.
time. And it is in these transitions that we're talking about that happens.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I feel it's interesting because I never actually wanted to be a mom. That wasn't like a life goal of mine. I was going to be this independent woman, not married. I was a broadcast major, so I was going to be on TV and all these things. So I had all these dreams, and my path changed right away after college too, because I got married directly after college, even though I hadn't planned on it. Had a kid a year later, or what? Found out we were pregnant a year later,
Yeah.
and my life completely changed, and I became. I think as soon as you have your first child, the mother nurturing comes into
Totally.
effect immediately. And I wanted to be a career woman. You know, I wanted to have my separate job or my separate life, but I also had this longing for my kids
Yeah.
and to be with them. And I think as women, a lot of times, especially in this culture, and the culture is saying you need to be strong and independent and do all these
Yeah.
things and be in multiple roles, and um, we get so confused on where should I be
Yes.
at in this moment. And it's kind of that it's that decision that we need to make for ourselves, what's right
Right.
for us and our family. And it might be being a working mom, and I've had to do that for a very long time in different ways. I've gone to work, I've worked at home, I've done all the things. I was a stay-at-home mom for 6 months when I had my third kid, and I would say that was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had.
It is hard.
You
It's
know,
really hard. And I
so
think you're absolutely right about the culture. This is the tough part. And this is another conversation I had with my sister last night. See, I was having kids and being bombarded at that point in time. That's when the whole conversation about the glass ceiling came into play with, you know, women busting through this glass ceiling that in business had traditionally all been male. And there was a song, and it was Anjali Perfume. I can bring home the bacon. I bring home the bacon. I fry it up in a pan, And how did it go? And never let my man forget he's a man.
Mm.
So you've got a woman working full time, not only working full time, but she's an executive. She's obviously a breadwinner. She's then reading books to her kids at night. And then she's being like, this third person who's like wife extraordinaire. So this whole thing for women was you can have it all, you can do it all. But you know what, Gabe? We don't have to do it all.
Mhm.
And that's where it comes in. You just have to really decide for yourself and with your partner and for yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to decide. You can't let someone else decide for you
Mhm.
what is the best thing for you. So we can't do it all. I think that we clearly have seen that since the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and we need to be okay with what we can do. Now social media, that throws a whole nother thing into it,
It sure
making
does.
making people feel like they are making young girls feel like no matter what they do, they're not enough.
Mm.
Their body parts aren't enough. Their personality's not enough. They're not bigger than life. They're not famous. And they're not on the cover of Vogue or People magazine. And that is so not true, because God made everybody individually and God gave everybody special gifts, and those are the things that we need to unlock.
Right. And he gave us special gifts and not all the gifts. And there's a reason for that. It's because
Right.
we're a community as well. And what
Yes.
giftings I have, you may not, but you can help complete with your giftings,
Right.
and I think it's the same in the husband wife relationship, because you usually don't marry the same person as yourself.
Right.
You marry someone
It's
completely
true.
opposite, but it's because you're completing each other. And
Yes.
so that's frustrating at times because you wish they were like you. It would make it way worse,
Yeah,
probably.
you'd understand a little better, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, we know where they're coming from, but
Yes.
culture does play a very big role in this. Now, when you were deciding to stay at home, because you're right. I mean, with culture, it says we can do it all. We should be able
Right.
to, and without that guilt or the shame of I can't do it
Right.
all. Um,
Right.
let's break that shame right now, because we can't. We have to pick and choose. There's a reason that you do one or two things well, or you can be mediocre at a bunch of things. It's better to do one or two things well. If you are interested in hearing these stories I'm sharing more in depth, you need to pick up a copy of the Lemonade Stand 2 anthology. This series is a powerful testimony of others willing to step up and share their stories for emotional growth and inspiration. I had the privilege to be a part of Book 2, which is a collective of narratives of true, everyday heroes who show you how to stand in your power, find the courage to seek truth, and reveal your authentic self. I wrote the Running for My Life chapter because we need to have more open conversations about mental health. Too many young souls are falling culprits to depression or suicide in this noisy world. I decided it was time to open up and share my story. I dealt with severe depression and anxiety in early adulthood, and through personal development, mentorship, and my deep faith, I was able to take back my life and come off all medications. It's hard to be vulnerable in this area that is usually filled with much shame and guilt, and I didn't want to end up back in that place by drawing out all the emotions I knew would come out as I wrote, but I knew it was time. It was time to share the story I've hidden for years in an effort to help and support anyone else who may be dealing with negative thoughts or feelings that are spiraling them down into a dark place. There is hope and light in the midst of darkness. Are you in the midst of a struggle of your own? Pick up a copy of this book to find encouragement, inspiration, and motivation to move forward into your breakthrough. Our stories are meant to be shared. Head to www.redhotmindset.com to snag your signed copy of the Lemonade Stand 2. But as you were deciding, what were some of the fears that you had? What were some of the things that may have been holding you back from actually pulling the plug?
Well, it took me a long time. Like I said, I was 42 when I actually called New York and handed in my resignation. Um, and that was my job, and my successes and my career were part of who I was as a person.
Hmm.
I had started working in a clothing store when I was 17, and I then carried that all the way through college breaks and then went into that as a career. And what, how many years is that that's what, 17 to 42? How many, that's a lot of years. What is that? How many years is that,
Is
Gabe?
it 25? Did I get it right? Yeah.
Um, okay. We'll
Go with
go with
that.
25. Yeah. I didn't figure it out, and I'm thinking other things. So I'm not doing the math in the head right now, but yeah, that's a long time to have that be part of your routine and be part of you. So the actual morning that I went to call New York, I laid down on the love seat in our family room, and just my stomach was turning, and I kept saying to myself, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Not only for the family, for exampling to my children, do I need to keep working so that they will see that they had a working mom, so that will then give them that, view. And you go through all of these different scenarios in your head. And I guess at the end of the day, I just had to ask myself, what do I want to do? Where do I feel I will best be for the next X number of years? And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm just doing it, because I'm agonizing over not being with the kids, and I'm agonizing over not being with the job. Which one to me is the most important place where I want to be? And
Mm.
that's when I just picked myself up off the love seat and went in and called New York, and that. So, you know,
That's cool. And it is agonizing.
it
Was
is.
there, after you made that decision, after you made the call to New York, did you feel a peace in your spirit, or what was did you have a confirmation once you had it said and done?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there was a few things. I got a call about a month after I had quit, and it was for a new position, a new division that
Mm.
Donna Karen was opening up, Donna Karen Intimates, and they needed somebody in the Pacific Northwest, and they called me, and I was really excited about that, because this was like, this was still within a few, I think it was a month later, a month and a half later, they did call, and it was still, I would, when you work for 25 years and you have a career, you don't just wake up the next morning, even though you've made the decision that you wanted to make. You don't just wake up and go, all's good, because because it is a process. And so I actually took the interview and went and talked to them. And at the end of the interview, I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, but I can't do this. I've made the decision to stay home with my kids. But I think, and I'm sorry, I felt bad that I had wasted their time, but it helped me clarify. And I went home, and it was like, yep, yep. Now I'm good to go. So
Oh, that's
that's
cool.
how that came about. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting story. And it is
Uh-huh.
interesting to me because I feel like when we make a decision, other opportunities will come. And
Yes.
we might feel like, oh, well, maybe we didn't make the right decision. We got to go here. But we have to remember that sometimes we're being tested, or it may look appealing, but it really might still not be the right path for us. So that is
Yeah,
interesting.
you have to look inside. I think you really, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think that, women have been given an opportunity, a lot of opportunities in the last 40 years.
Hmm.
And I think that we can't do it all. So we really have to take this wonderful opportunity to decide not to be told what it is we want to do in order to improve the life of every woman on the planet. We have to ask ourselves what it is that we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Now, when you moved to stay at home mom, did you ever have a fear? And this might sound really weird, but I think a lot of us moms do this when we stay at home, because it's like, maybe who am I, or what am I bringing to the world? Even though we are bringing
Mhm.
something important when we are raising our kids, that's the most important thing. It's
Mhm.
like our biggest ministry, right? But did you ever have a fear, because a lot of your identity was in buying and sales and retail, about losing yourself to motherhood?
I would say that that's an interesting thing. I would say that I did not have that fear while it was going on.
Mm.
That concern came after the kids had left to go away to school.
Mm.
Greg turned to me and said, "Are you going to go back to work?" And I
Question.
said, no, you know, no, I'm not. And then because I knew it wasn't, sometimes if you force yourself to do something that you are not ready to do or you don't want to do, it puts you on a path that doesn't allow you to look inside yourself long enough to decide maybe what is it that you're supposed to be doing, what is God pushing you to do, what is the direction that you should be going in. But if you fill your, because being a mom, I you know I started that staying home when, like I said, when Anna was in her second day of preschool, or her second year of preschool, and Max would have been going into first grade, I guess, first or second grade, I guess. And you are consumed. That's a big job, and it's a hard job, and it is not for the faint hearted. And it's a lot of work, and you get all the grief, especially as they get to be teenagers. You have to really buck up and be strong. And so I was really thrilled to be able to do that and have the opportunity to do that. But it wasn't until after everybody left that I really had to say, okay, now what's the chapter going to look like? And then when they leave, when they graduate from college and they literally go out on their own, even though sometimes they have to move home for a little bit to get themselves, save some money and, figure out the whole job thing. But when they're actually gone and they've graduated from college and they're out, I would say that was like more of a reckoning moment for me
Mm.
than, because when they're coming home for college, you still have one foot in and one foot out, when they're going to college. So, fear, did I have a fear? That the fear came when I couldn't figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, but I knew I wasn't supposed to um, get a job to fill my time. My mother-in-law said something to me at one point in time about filling up your time. And I'm not a filler up of time type of a person. I need to have meaning. There needs to be something meaningful. And that's stressful in itself when you try to make what you're doing with the chapters of your life meaningful.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Yeah.
I love that. It is true. We could fill our time with many
Mhm.
different things, but is what we're filling our time with um important? Is it
Right.
is it advancing the kingdom? Is
Is it
it
joyful?
is
Is
it
it?
joyful? Yeah. All those
Yeah.
things. So through it all, looking back, what do you think was one of the biggest lessons that you learned in that transition?
In the transition of staying home,
Mhm.
that I'm not a good cook.
Me neither.
It's not my gift. I'll give you healthy food. I don't care what it tastes like before I'll give you something else. Um, what did I learn in that transition? I think that I I think that I learned to do a lot of things that I had not done before. And I learned I think one of the most important things that happened, Gabe, that I wasn't even aware was happening, was I learned to follow the path that God provided for me because of the way He made my personality.
Mm.
Everybody has personality traits that contribute to different situations for the good. Um, some people are leaders, some people are followers, some people are shy, some people are bold. And that's the way that we're all individually made. And you can't have a world of just one type of those people. So I would say the biggest overall lesson over the whole course of being a stay at home mom was that I learned, God showed me who I was as a person.
Mm, I love that. And I think that's one of the best gifts or lessons we could learn.
Yes, because when the end comes and I'm standing at the gates looking at God, I want so desperately to be able. I mean, my favorite phrase is well done, you
Mm.
know, good and faithful servant. And I think that we all probably as a Christian hope for that. And so I do try to put myself in a life that I think is where God wants me to be.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
As we're wrapping up, I want to encourage you all come back next week because Lynn is going to join us again and share out with us the process of how to redefine our beautiful life and live it to the fullest. And this comes with our transitions. One of the transitions she shares about is her transition from full-time work to stay-at-home mom. And there are many of them. And if you want to hear more of them, you need to get the book, The Lemonade Stand, too, because she beautifully portrays all the different transitions that she's had and the experiences she's had and relates them to how we can do that. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that subject next Tuesday. But I know listeners are going to want to connect with you. So where is the best place that they can find you, Lynn?
The best place they can find me. Well, my website, 3thebook.com, has contact information on it. So that would probably be the best place if they wanted to actually connect with me.
Awesome. Now, and three, the book it's a novel. Is it a fiction of
It's no,
story
it's
of what
it,
happened?
it's nonfiction. It's
Okay.
nonfiction novel about a car accident our kids were in 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to get it. I haven't gotten it yet. So I'm excited
Thank you.
but is interesting. Those are defining moments too. And
Yes.
I love because my writing has been mostly nonfiction as well, but it's the lessons that God has taught me that I feel like he wants me to use to share with others. And I feel like he's kind of got you on that similar path as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gabe. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for coming on, Lynn. I loved hearing your story, and I love how you are definitely just listening and following where you are being led next. So in all things I pray, you all just run your race. I believe in you.